Sanctuaries of their shame, so sanctified my name.
Beyond the suburbs go, and reach the burial ground. Let no man see thy going, attain that place alone, a place of sainted graves and martyr stone. Stand on the fresh-turned soil, there in the dismal corner, there in the shadowy nook, multitudinous eyes will look upon thee from the somber silence. The spirits of the martyrs are these souls, gathered together at long last beneath these rafters and in these ignoble holes.
I'd like to call up Sarpreet Singh and the team. I'd like to come up on stage, and if you can give them a warm welcome. Before I ask the audience for their questions, I'd like to ask a question myself. This relates to all of you. I believe you did a show in Delhi recently. What I would like to know is, what was the response there in Delhi, and were you welcomed there when you did the show?
Yeah, we were lucky enough to do a show in Delhi the first 3 days when we got there, which happened to be the 3 days of the massacre in October and November, exactly 30 years later. So it was very powerful to be there, and it was kind of what the project had been working towards since its inception. I remember when I auditioned, there was a brief little snippet that said, possible trip to India, and that's what got me to the audition. And I actually was only there for the last of the three, but I can say it was a very, very moving experience, a very receptive audience, and a different context than we had experienced in North America anywhere. But I'm sure other people have other things to say.
The responses we received in Delhi were they were beautiful. The amount of emotion that people showed in the audience, just in sort of their presence in their seats, and the number of personal stories that they told was absolutely mind-boggling.
See, the slaughtered calves, so smitten and so laid. Is there a price for their death? How shall that price be paid?
Forgive, ye shamed of the earth. Yours is a pauper lord. Poor was he during your life, and poorer still of late. When to my door you come to ask for your reward, I'll open wide. See, I am fallen from my high estate. I grieve for you, my children. My heart is sad for you. Your dead were fatally dead, and neither I nor you know why you died or wherefore, for whom, nor by what laws. Your deaths are without reason.
Without reason.
Your lives are without cause.
Without cause.
I had no idea that people would be so ready to share, but I was very grateful to them because it was a much more enriching experience to hear their stories than it would have been if I had no idea what they were thinking. So it was, the experience itself was life-changing.
And I would like to ask the audience, if anyone's got a question, if you can raise your hands.
In terms of you being non-Sikhs, how difficult did you find to do these roles with all the research and the emotions that were involved in doing this play?
We did a lot of dramaturgical work before Sapri even had us go through the scripts and begin learning our lines and our parts so that we would really understand the situation and the tragedy that had occurred in 1984, but also way before that. So we were able kind of to get the background, so we were able to engage our audiences as best we could. But I felt like after I learned about what happened, it is just so tragic. It's so sad. I mean, I feel like my compassion goes out to the Sikh people after what happened. So I feel like we're all connected. We're all part of humanity.
Crowds get thicker and mobs do swell. Louder and louder sounds her knell. Politicians abound, every color and hue, like vultures drawn to a rotting corpse. The hypocrites pull out the stops, burst into wrenching sobs anew. Like a virus vile, this show of grief that rages unchecked throughout her fief. In Tilak Vihar, the mourners weep, scared, confused, dumbfounded, dazed, much like a frightened herd of sheep that mills without its shepherd, phased.
No, not but of the gathering clouds that cover the sun like silent shrouds.
The storm of vengeance about to burst with an all-consuming bloody thirst.
How can they guess what is to pass? For are there not the faithful ones? Have they not, and their wives and sons, stood by the throne steadfast, unmasked?
The mother's dead. What's done is done. They look with hope to her only son.
I really am so thrilled to be able to tell this story and, work with the rest of the beautiful cast and crew. I feel like now I'll always be connected to the Sikh people.
Allison said, we did a lot of dramaturgical work and learned not just about the history from 1947 to 1984, but also just how the Sikh religion was started and over the past 500 years. And just knowing that these stories, that Kultar's and Balu's stories were true stories, true accounts, was heart-wrenching. And I found it easy, I don't know if that's the right word, but to find the pain and connection to that. Also, the connection to the Jewish history of it too, and the Jews of Kishinev, and connecting that to the massacre that happened to the Sikhs, and that these kind of events, unfortunately, keep repeating themselves in history, not just to Jewish people or Sikhs, to other cultures and denominations.
May you never have any happy dreams. May you never sleep the peaceful sleep. May you ever wake to the sound of screams. May rotting guilt in your soul seep.
May the fires keep burning in your minds. May you never know joy or one act kind.
May your souls burn forever in hell. May your only music be the knell.
May your dreams be scattered to the wind. May your hopes be ground into the dust. May you for forgiveness forever lust. May you lie helpless.
Through the performance, instead of thinking about being somebody I'm not, I think about how can I channel and honor that person through myself, and yeah.
So I'd like to add a couple of things. The casting of non-Sikh or non-South Asian actors in the play was no accident. It was very much a part of the design of the play and the production, because at one level it's very powerful to embrace the pain of the other. Apni qaum diyan te har koi gallan karta hai, but when you embrace the pain of the other, there's a outpouring of compassion which can't be talked about. It just has to be experienced. And since most of the audience is Sikh today, I think all of you completely understand that embracing the pain of the other is integral to the ethos of Sikhism. So in that sense, having the construction of the play being such that non-South Asian or non-Sikh actors were telling the story of the children of Delhi added a very interesting dimension that audiences everywhere have picked upon.
To approach a story that I didn't feel like culturally belonged to me, but I would be very disappointed in humanity if they were unable to connect to such a tremendous tragedy simply because it wasn't their people. So it was just something, sort of a hurdle that you had to get over, but very much worth it.
There's one there.
Baji, just following on from your question about Delhi and also what you've just discussed about the story of Kishinev and how obviously this is a story that has repeated itself countless times and continues to repeat itself right now in the Middle East. Obviously this is a story that's unfurling as we speak, and trying to perhaps look for any signs of optimism about the state of humanity and whether we are learning lessons. Going back to your experience in Delhi, and of course, Baji, you've said that the vast majority of us here are Sikh. So my first question is, what was the proportion of, or what was the mix of the audience in Delhi? And then my second question, following on from that, is, did you see in Delhi any appetite at all for revisiting, the story that occurred in 1984 in Delhi, and any possibility or hope that people wanted to address the issues that arose in 1984 with a view to actually humanity in general and the people of India in particular learning the lessons of 1984?
So the audience in Delhi was quite interesting. Of course, there were quite a few Sikhs in the audience, but the first two shows, which were in a very small theater, were by invitation only and from people who became, for people who became aware and really wanted to attend. And the mix was a very interesting mix of diplomats, human rights activists, well-known Sikh figures, well-known figures from outside the Sikh community. Let me give you a few examples. We had some wonderful human rights activists. Most notable among them was Dr. Uma Chakravarti, who is one of the best-known feminists in India and a retired professor, and who had done seminal work in 1984 interviewing the victims, and she had written a 600-page book about the victims of 1984. I think she's become a bit of a mentor to the cast here who got to spend some time with her. Harsh Mandar, who's a well-known activist. Manoj Mitta, who with Harvinder Singh Phulka wrote a wonderful book about 1984 and has just written a book about Godhra as well. Phulka ji was not able to come to the show because this was the exact 30-year anniversary, and given the tremendous effort that he has spent fighting for justice for the victims of 1984, you can well imagine how busy he must have been at that time with multiple rallies, television appearances. We talked on the phone. He was delighted that we were there. He sent his daughter, who's also a human rights attorney, to see the play. And then the cast had the wonderful opportunity to meet with Mr. Phulka right at the Delhi High Court a day later. The Indian ambassador to Israel was there, as were a couple of members of parliament, a plethora of retired senior civil servants, generals, senior police officers. So it was a very interesting mix. Now, as far as the second part of the question is concerned, was there an appetite to talk about 1984? And I will answer this question not so much about Delhi per se, but all, in the context of all of our India shows. Because after 3 shows in Delhi, we proceeded to Chandigarh, where we were sponsored by the Punjab Arts Council, which is the apex arts body in the Punjab. Then we had a show in a tiny little village in the Punjab called Preetnagar that some of you may be aware of as the home of the journal Preetladi, and at one point in time the epicenter of the arts in the Punjab before the partition of India. And then the Sikh show in Amritsar. And by and large, we saw tremendous engagement from the audience and a great sense of gratitude that the conversation about 1984 had been started again. And this was no different in North America. We saw exactly the same sentiment. There were people in the audience, including, I will confess, my own aunt, who was instrumental in our bringing the play to both Preetnagar and Amritsar, who had a tiny little feeling in their hearts that, is there any point in talking about 1984? Is it going to elicit feelings of vengeance? Is it going to make people restless? Is it a topic worthy of discussion 30 years after the fact? And I can tell you that I had numerous conversations with people, including my aunt, who didn't tell me before the performance that she had those misgivings, but did share those misgivings after the fact, and also said that after she saw the production, all of her misgivings evaporated, and she certainly understood why it was important to have a conversation around 1984. So just to summarize, by and large, the response has been profoundly, uplifting, and the overarching sentiment has been, if I could sort of, boil it down to a sentence, thank you for getting the conversation started. That has been the overwhelming sentiment. Would anybody like to add anything to that?
Anyone else with any questions?
It is an eye-opener. What made you want to do this, though? For the people abroad? The youngsters, is it? Or to show what happened? Tell what happened?
So motivation, I think I want to make sure that I understand your question and answer the right question. Did you ask what is the motivation for doing Kultar's Mime? Yes. So it might be useful to very briefly talk about the history of how this came about. Kultar's Mime, the poem, was written, I wrote the poem about 24 years ago as a young man, after I left India and went to the US. And it was largely prompted by my getting access to several documents that were not available in India readily. Included in those was a civil rights report, which, by the way, is available online, and I would encourage every young person in the audience in particular to read if you want to get first-hand information about what happened in 1984. It's called Who Are the Guilty? It wasn't prepared by any Sikh organization. It was prepared by two Indian civil rights organizations, the PUCL and the PUDR, under the aegis of Justice Tarkunde, who was a very well-respected attorney and a judge of the Bombay High Court. So this report painstakingly details what happened in Delhi, neighborhood by neighborhood. It lists the victims, it lists the perpetrators, it lists which senior Congress Party officials were seen inciting the mobs and paying them. It's really essential reading for anyone who wants to learn the history. A couple of other things, an article called Gangster Rule by Madhu Kishwar, an intrepid Indian journalist who wrote an article in her journal Manushi, and then finally the groundbreaking work of anthropologist Dr. Veena Das, who actually followed some of the children of Delhi in the neighborhood of Tilak Vihar, which is where the play is set in, and Michelle alluded to that earlier. I mean, I'm sorry to share with you that some of the play is fictionalized, of course, as was the poem, but a couple of the stories in particular, the young deaf-mute boy who can't articulate his pain at his father's lynching and acts it out, and the little girl whose father is burned alive in front of her while she refuses to let go of his hand. These are sadly true stories written about in Dr. Das's book and her research. So the poem came out of my emotions and feelings after reading all of these things. And then, a couple of decades later, my co-director and co-composer, Meher Kaur, took the poem and decided to turn it into a play. So it was first put up about 1.5 years ago in a suburb in Boston. It was very well received. And this year, the Sikh Research Institute, which several of you may be familiar with because Sikhri does good work in the UK as well, reached out to me and offered me a platform to bring the play to different parts of initially North America as part of the 30-year commemoration of 1984. So what was intended to be a series of 5 performances in Boston, New York, New Jersey, Ottawa, and Toronto kind of snowballed into what Kultar's Mime has become. Today was our 15th performance. And in addition to the various performances in North America, we've had, and the UK, we've had 6 performances in India. And when we get back to the US after a hiatus of 10 days, we'll be performing in Los Angeles, and then we'll be returning to the San Francisco Bay Area. And we have, requests from all over the world, literally, to come back and perform, including the UK. We will be back. We will be in London for sure. And we've been invited back to India as well to perform in various places. So the motivation really was to get the conversation going. And I'll draw your attention to a couple of lines in the poem and the play that are important. If you remember, there was a line which said, proud community, courage was its fame, hangs down its head and weeps in shame. So 1984 was a traumatic experience for the Sikh community for a number of reasons. Of course, at the most basic level, it was a horrible tragedy in which many people lost their lives and, families were devastated. Women were molested, en masse. So horrible, horrible things happened. Layered on that was the sense of shame that we felt as a community. We, Sikhs, who had been renowned in India for centuries as the protectors of the weak. You know, those of you who have studied Sikh history know that when the Afghan hordes attacked India again and again in the 18th century, the Sikhs were the only power that stood between the Afghans and the common people. And when the Afghans would carry off, crowds of young women who they had enslaved, the Sikhs would attack the Afghans at the dead of night and release the women captives and take them home. This was the history of the community, and now all of a sudden we were at the receiving end. All of these horrors that you saw depicted in the play today were perpetrated upon us. So there's been a reluctance to talk about 1984 for a number of reasons. The pain, the hurt, the deep sense of shame, the feeling encouraged by the larger society that Sikhs live in India, that you should really move on, forget about it, 30 years have passed, just move on. So as a result of that, the conversation about 1984 had completely stopped. And I think the primary motivation for reviving Kultar's Mime and taking it everywhere was to really revive the conversation. And I would like to think, and I feel that given the response that we've got from audiences everywhere, we have achieved some measure of success. We've been written about extensively in the Indian press. Just today, there was a lengthy article and a very powerful review in the Hindustan Times, which is probably one of the most widely circulated newspapers in India. Yesterday, we were on the Nihal show at the BBC, and there's a lot more going on, and there's a lot more that's going to happen. So the conversation has clearly started, and that was really our motivation. I'm sorry to give you such a long, detailed answer to a simple question, but it was certainly an important one, and I thank you for asking it.
We hear speeches about 1984 or personal accounts. You can read books, but I think the power of acting was there to be seen. The question I had is, do you plan to take Kultar's Mime to a non-Sikh audience? Because we probably know something about that story. And have you thought about using television and mainstream media? Because I'm sure Sikhs around the world could actually help.
So, excellent question. This play has not been created exclusively for Sikh audiences. Far from it. It is intended to be very accessible, to everyone, the fact that it's in English. And really, we've tried to create a production that hopefully stands on its own merits as theater. And the hope is that it will attract theater goers, whether they are Sikhs, or not. Some of our shows have had a very diverse mix. The premiere at Harvard University, for instance, had, I would say, maybe 40 to 50% Sikhs. Our second show in Boston, in the Boston area at Somerville, also had a very diverse audience. So absolutely the intention is to attract as diverse an audience as possible. This is just the beginning. And, as we go back to some important venues, such as Delhi, New York City, where we've been invited again, this is going to be presented very much as a theatrical event and not a, quote, Sikh event. So the intention is exactly that. And what you can do as an audience is that if we ever come back to Birmingham, which I suspect we will, make it a point to invite your non-Sikh friends. Every person who's coming should try to bring at least a couple of non-Sikhs with them, and that's how you spread the word. Your final question, using television to disseminate, whatever message we're trying to disseminate with the play, that's definitely in the works. The end of November, we are going to be performing at the Sikh Lens Festival in California. And as part of that, we will go into a studio and record Kultar's Mime with multiple cameras. You've seen the production. It's very immersive. capturing the power of the production on a video is not easy. So we will go through the recording, we'll evaluate, and if it looks like we have something that's worth sharing on television, we will absolutely try to share it within television as well. But honestly, the impact of a live production where you get to go on stage, look at the paintings, when you're listening to the actors, when the actors are among you, very difficult to recreate on any other medium. But excellent question. Thank you for that.
On the behalf of National Sikh Museum based in Derby, I cannot commend enough the work, especially the non-Sikh your team has done. Never seen anything like so visually that hits right here, straight. You know, it goes through people. Cannot commend enough. Inna vadiya thada kam hai. Never seen anything like it. Now, how did you get out of Delhi? I'm sure they would have questioned you of some things and what your intentions are. Are you here to, ki karne ki gaye? Did they not ask you that?
So we didn't encounter anything like that in India at all, and we can speculate as to why. Maybe one of the reasons is that those who are powerful live with such impunity that they don't even care about things like these. Their attitude is, kari jao sanu ki farak panda. I don't know. But you said something interesting when you were speaking that I want to address. So I think that the world always tries to label people for various reasons and various agendas. And what I would say to you and other young people like you who are prompted to respond to these things is, first of all, go back to our history and remember and reiterate every day that the Sikh tradition of standing up to oppression started not with Guru Gobind Singh Ji and his Kirpan, but from Sri Guru Nanak Sahib himself. He was the first Guru who stood up to oppression by standing up and loudly condemning what Babur was doing in the northern Indian subcontinent at the time. So this is really our history. This is who we are. Fighting oppression is integral to our ethos. And I think that we should never sit idly by when somebody tries to label us. And if you're trying to fight for justice and somebody calls you a terrorist, I think that, we should really get in their faces and ask, show me, prove to me that anything that I'm doing is harmful towards anyone other than the perpetrators of things like these. And, rhetoric is easy, but I would say that, we have always been targeted, not just by the Indian government. Go back hundreds of years, whenever we stood up to our principles and tried to fight for our principles, we were slandered, by Zakaria Khan and Mir Banu and Ahmad Shah Abdali and his minions and everyone who came after that. It's no different now. And we never gave up our ideals, and there's no reason for us to start anytime soon. So my 2 cents would be, let's stay in Chardi Kala, let's keep on doing whatever we need to do. And if anyone labels us, let's be vigilant and let's fight back.
Hello. What I want to know is, in your opinion, do you think we will get justice for this?
So that's an excellent question. Do I think we will get justice? There's a pretty sad line in the play. You may plead for justice till you die, but there's no one to heed your desperate cry. What does that really mean? Does it mean that we should give up? No, far from it. What it means is that pleading is not going to get us justice. What is going to get us justice? Kultar's mime is not going to get us justice. I have enough gray hair to not be naive about these things. The walls aren't going to come tumbling down. Jagdish Titler isn't going to go to jail because we put up Kultar's mime. What is hopefully going to happen is that the conversation will start. Everywhere we go in the audience, there are young actors, playwrights, poets, rappers, musicians. Let there be 1,000 pieces of art. Let there be 1,000,000 works of art that talk about 1984 and other instances of injustice against anyone, whether it's Hindus, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Palestinians, who cares? It is your job as a Khalsa to stand up and speak up. And if we are constantly vigilant, and if we constantly shine the spotlight on every instance of injustice, I believe, I am not cynical about this at all, I believe that there will be justice. There'll be justice for the Sikhs, as there will be justice for everyone. But we just can't let the conversation stop, and that's the role of art. That's the reason why Kultar's Mime exists.
Thank you for all your questions. I'd like to thank you once again for coming here and supporting the show. And finally, I'd like to call up on stage one of my colleagues who organised the event, Kulvinder Singh, Butler from Huddersfield, if you can come up on stage.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. First of all, I'd like to thank Sarpreet Singh and all the crew that came over in such a tight schedule. What you need to appreciate is that all this happened within 2 or 3 weeks. It was just by chance. I did a Google and something came up, said Kultar's Mime. What does Kultar's Mime mean? The only thing I knew was I think it's a Sikh name. What is this? We had an instant phone call made the next morning. Sarpreet rang myself and he said, what is it that you wanted to know? I said, you're performing in America, Canada, and in India. Would love to have this show in the UK. We can do a lot of wonderful things in the Gurdwaras. And the media here is today, the Sikh channel is here, sending a message all over the world. But if we need to support the acts as the one that's being done today. It is imperative that we go to a wider audience. Going to the same audience is fine. We have to carry on doing that because it's a massive struggle. This is not an easy task to do. 30 years and we still haven't had justice. I mean, I was speaking to some of the cast members and when I asked them a question, did you know anything about the 1984? They said, we didn't know whether it even existed. This is how poor we were in sending the message to the world. But luckily we've got the media like the Sikh channel and the other channels that are doing a job. And we can't thank them enough because they gave us the time. When we asked and I requested them, please give us time. We've only got 2 weeks to promote this event and do what we can, but this event has to come to the UK. 2 of my colleagues, Guraj Singh Gill and Jaswant Singh Chattar, were there. When I just finished my phone call with Sarpreet, I said 1984, going to be performed by non-Sikhs who are going on a world tour. It will be a shame to the Sikh community. We couldn't even present something in the UK. I said, how are we going to do it? I'm not going to go to any organizations. I just need an answer within the next 5 minutes. How is it going to happen? Both of them, within an instant, said, it's going to happen. It's going to happen and we're going to do it. So the way it started, I'm born and I've lived always in Huddersfield. We said, right, the first show is in Huddersfield. Guraj is from Leeds, Jaswant is from Bradford. The show is going to begin. I told Sarpreet, he said, how wonderful. Are you kidding? Within 2 weeks you're going to arrange a show of this magnitude? I said, yes, it's going to happen because it's a matter of truth and justice, and it will happen. So this is how Kultar's Mime came about, and the sort of affection and the goodwill from the cast and everybody else is amazing. If you see him in person and you talk to them, it's mind-blowing. And their acting, you've seen it for yourselves. It's extraordinary. The last thing I'd like to say is that we need more people on board next time, because Kultar's Mime is going to go to the world. After this, we hope Sarpreet and his crew will take other projects on, because there's a lot to discuss about 1984. We had the incidents in June 1984 where we were labelled, every single person was labelled with a beard, you're a terrorist, like my friend just said. I was personally labelled as a terrorist as well. So there's a big message that we have to send to the wider world, which is one of the questions the gentleman from the Sikh Federation clearly mentioned. We need to take it to the non-Sikh community. We have to take our message across. Until we get justice, let's make it clear to everybody. The struggle is going to continue. We don't have to go there ranting and firing and bulleting people or anything, but the message of the Sikh gurus and whatever we were told to do is going to go ahead, and it's going to take every corner of the world, and people will hear us. And it's only going to happen when we've got people like these spreading the message, and we have to do more. And the only way it's going to happen is it costs money, it takes time, and it takes a lot of effort. So just as a token gesture, on behalf of the Sikh Sangat, I'd like Jaswant Singh Chatta to come up to the stage and present Sarpreet, and I'd like Guraj to get up as well and present this token gesture as a to Sarpreet and the crew. Can you all give a round of applause, please? And finally, what I'd like to say is, for this to happen, it was a lot of courage and guts, because we didn't know what the reception is going to be. But it does cost a lot of money. So on the way, through the doors over there, there's 2 buckets there. Jinni bhi tusi sharda de naal koi bhi jinni bhi tusi maya dena chahne jarur ode vich deo. We'd appreciate it, because we want more functions and we want activities to take place within the UK and all over the world. I know it's something that it's in a form of an appeal, but we have to make this appeal, because we all want you to be part of this contribution, because it is something that our fellow actors and Sarpreet have made this happen. This wasn't planned within their program. It was Canada, America and India. So we had to do this on the spur of the time and the moment. So thank you once again, Sarpreet and all the actors. And in the Sikh format, I will also say, in the Sikh way, we commend everybody. सारे ने जयकारे दा जवाब जयकारे च देना है. बोले सोनेहाल. Thank you very much.